Welcome back, folks, to the craziest people in lighting, which is Michael Colligan and Greg Eric. Oh, no, it's TCP. That's right. I forgot. But before we talk a little bit more about them, Greg, we got to talk about Dr. Alp Durmus, Department of Architectural Engineering at Pennsylvania State University. That was a wild one, man.
Yeah, great topic. Great discussion on color and how that matters in lighting.
Not just color, but perception, like how we can influence the
Yes.
perception of people. It was kind of a wild talk. We went back and forth on, he told us what he knew, and then we talked about what the industry and what we don't know and what maybe we can do. Wouldn't that be fun? So thank you, Dr. Alp Durmus, for coming on the show. Good times. But, Greggy, the craziest ones, we used to have the title, and now it goes over to TCP. Go to tcpi.com, Greg. I go there every day.
Got to check it out. And they're solistic sun mimicking lights. And what they do with that is an innovative LED chip. A lot of people have LED lighting and they slam it out there and make it look like everybody else's. But TCP takes it to the next step. Does that make them crazy? I don't know. Does it make them smart? Yeah. But it tells them that what they do is they make a innovative chip that eliminates the blue spike that's found in most LED lights. So it's the most natural sunlight bulb in the market. And it comes in an LED T8, which I know because I've sold some. I've had specific applications where people need that. And that is really the only solution in the market that I've found that gives you the best light available out of an LED T8 tube. That's from TCP. They also have lamps and their Starlight lamp. So check that product line out.
And as distributors out there, I order from TCP every day. So I use them every day. So go to tcpi.com, check them out. And, of course, long-time members of Nailed, Greg. If you're not associated, that's your problem at this point. But I've been telling you guys about this for years. You got to join Nailed. But for right now, Dr. Alp Durmus, get a grip on lighting. Welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, Dr. Alp Durmus.
Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Say hello to Greg Eric.
Hello, Greg.
Hi. Thanks for coming on. So we were looking at your bio a little bit, and rather than me try to repeat it, it looks like you're a lighting scientist. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Yes. I have done my PhD in architectural sciences, specialized in illumination, in University of Sydney, Australia.
Okay. So what do you do on a daily basis as a lighting scientist?
I do research on visual perception and how lighting systems affect people's perception and how we can improve the current systems to make it more efficient, energy efficient, but also increase the quality of the lighting. So I'm currently working at,
or you keep going. Yep.
Now, I'm just currently working at the Penn State as an assistant professor. So my job includes teaching as well as doing research as well.
Now, you said a word there that I think, in our opinion, at least Mike might chime in too, but efficiency. You're working on making lights more efficient still. I think we've gotten to a point where efficiency is there, but quality is really what I think is something that needs to be stressed more. But what are your thoughts on those two?
That's a great question, and that is coming more and more into the public discussion of lighting and of efficiency is in a point that we cannot really improve the luminous efficiency of a specific light source and individual light source, but we should be also looking at the quality of the lighting that we get from the lighting systems. And I agree to a point that lighting efficiency theoretically can hit a ceiling, and there are other non-energy benefits like the circadian impacts, non-image forming impacts, but also the visual perception, the clarity, and the other impacts as well.
This might be an odd question, but is all of your research only LED focused, or are you looking at other technologies?
Well, I would like to say that my research is technology neutral. LEDs just happen to be more efficient and modern and contemporary right now, but the metrics that we use or just the qualities that we are looking for in lighting systems are not specific to any specific technology, right? If you can define the effect of lighting in a technology neutral way, we can make our results, the research results, more generalizable in the future as well. So these results can be used for other technologies in the future.
The word quality, that's a dangerous word. Okay. And for quality to a lighting distributor or to a contractor would indicate the ability of the light source to emit the amount of lumens it did from the beginning of its life until the end over a very long period of time. So to a lighting distributor, quality is about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but quality is about how long the product lasts and how good its lumen maintenance is. You take a lighting designer, and quality is about beauty. It's more about the effect that the lighting system is creating. When you talk about quality with people that are talking about the non-energy benefits of lighting, they may be talking about circadian, they may be talking about dark sky. They may be like quality is a term that is often talked about but rarely defined. When you're talking about quality of light, what are you referring to?
That's a great question, and I totally agree that we talk about quality as an umbrella term. I mean, not I specifically in a research project or research paper, but when lighting folks start talking about quality, they might have different aspects of lighting, let's call them visual environment, right? Depending on which aspect you're looking for. If you're looking for a manufacturer point of view, of course, the quality of the built luminaire is more important for you, how much you're getting for your buck, and the life as well as the luminous flux output. When I say quality, I should maybe narrow it down a little more. I say perceived quality of the visual environment. So that is things that when an occupant in a space, user, let's call him user, goes to a space and starts looking for things, because that's what humans do, right? We are trying to find information, the visual information about the environment, because we're either trying to complete some tasks, visual tasks, or we're trying to engage in some activities, trying to find out what's happening in the environment, or just relax. So that quality is something that is not widely quantified or materialized in a way, and that's what I'm interested in my research. It's more about the human aspect of the quality side.
If we, so I'm going to make a comparison here, and Greg, you tell me if I'm going off on a bad tangent here or not. But you say a quality social networking platform, right? So what does that mean? Does it help people or does it hurt people? Is it engagement or is it addiction? Can we manipulate the visual environment, or can we use lighting to manipulate human beings so that they perceive things differently or in a way in which people want them using light? Like if I wanted to change your perception on something, you understand what I mean? Like, let's say I wanted to change your political perception on something, or let's say I want to change, nudge you to change your ideas. Does any of your research discuss perception, light, and the use of it to change people's hearts and minds?
Not the cognitive side of things, but I think it's a great question. I personally think that there are a lot of different aspects that goes into people's decisions, daily decision making, and it's really hard to boil down the decision making into one single aspect. You cannot really generalize and say, changing lighting from A to B will make people's hearts and minds change, because humans are quite complex, right? Our cognitive processes, there are a lot of different individual differences, cultural differences, and those differences come into play, and how we interact with the world is kind of affected by those processes. That's really hard to quantify. So with lighting, in terms of lighting, what we can do is, I guess, more on the concentrate on the things, tangible things for us that we can quantify, without getting too much into these effects, what we call confining factors, that the things that you cannot control. If you want to do an experiment, say, I want to see, I'm just making this up, the effect of CCT, correlated color temperature, on people's preference of a political party, say, because the elections are coming. So it's a topic that you might be interested in to research. And you can just put people into a room and just turn the lighting and see what party they're going to vote and see if there's going to be any difference. Now, what you could do is, like, depending on how you choose this sample, and sample when I say group of people that participates in your experiment, makes a huge difference. If you just choose your participants, if you do this experiment in a majorly red state, right, you might get a very biased sample size. So your results going to be widely affected by your sample. And if you choose the age group, maybe you will have a different sample, different result. So all these different factors that you have to control when you do these experiments, and it's really, really hard to make this experiment. I mean, it is possible probably, but then it will be either too expensive or just too time consuming to get a meaningful result. And even then, there's going to be some factors that you cannot really control, right? There are too many factors that makes who we are as a person come to a point as an adult, that to be able to control all these experiments, you will either have a huge sample size, maybe thousands, that's not going to be possible for an experiment to find out any effect, or you're going to be having confining factor. You're going to see some results, but those results are not going to be as meaningful as you would like them to be.
So you had a recent study or an article here about spectral optimization, and do you want to define, what you did with that study and what that was all about, the purpose and your findings?
Sure. Spectral optimization study that you refer to is my PhD work and some of the work that has been built from that. The idea is light interacts with surfaces in a very in a simple way that we can estimate. Light that hits on a surface of an object either is reflected, that comes to our eyes and that initiates vision, either transmitted if the object is transparent or translucent. And if the object is not transparent, it's either reflected or is absorbed by the object. So this light that is absorbed by the object turns into heat, and that becomes useless for lighting purposes. So we know that the LEDs and other solid state lighting devices, we can control, we can tune the spectral output of these LEDs. The idea comes, why don't we send enough light so most of the light is reflected and this absorbed light is minimized? So you can imagine that a red light, a red surface, will reflect a lot of longer wavelengths, like your head, right? But it will absorb the energy in the shorter wavelengths, just closer to UV. So any light that you send to the red object as the blue light will be wasted, pretty much. So if you can optimize the lighting, that the red light is going to be hat is going to be reflecting enough light so that you see and your visual perception is not going to change, you can actually save a lot of energy. And I started using computational methods to quantify the maximum energy savings. And in these initial studies that we were looking for, we didn't really limit our spectrum of the light source to any specific technology. We said, okay, what happens if we didn't have any limitations of the spectra? We can create crazy shapes, and we know that we cannot really create them right now with whatever technology we have. But what happens if tomorrow, in 20 years, 40 years, that we can create these SPDs? What will be the maximum energy savings? It turns out we can actually save up to 70% energy if we just optimize the lighting for each colored part of an object. And then I did some visual experiments in a lab condition again with colored objects, and these are mostly fruits and vegetables that people know their colors of. And there was other human-made objects as well, like a Coca-Cola can is a very known, like almost branded red, right? If you see the red of the Coca-Cola, you would know that that's it. If it's slightly different, then you will notice the differences. And it turns out that under controlled conditions, when the background is a certain way, people really couldn't tell the difference between the optimized lighting and the white light source. And this is pretty much the idea. And of course, there are applications of this to beyond architectural lighting, like museum lighting, and that's one of the things that I'm quite interested in as well.
It's interesting that is it TM-20 or TM-30? That's the IES's technical memorandum on color. So TM-30. Okay, so I saw a demonstration of it a couple of years ago where I think they were doing they were optimizing the light to show more rich colors or make the boxes look ugly, and they were showing us different ways that you can do this. It was a demonstration room. I found it fascinating. Then it was explained to me. Then I walked out of the room and forgot everything. I couldn't remember how, like, it was complicated. The other thing is that I sell light bulbs every day. And one of the things that's super confusing for people, like Greg, how long are we into like 730K, 830K, 950K? Like that was a ride before we were even in lighting, like labeling lights by their Kelvin temperature rather than cool white, daylight, and warm white. And when I speak to customers on the order desk, they still want to hear about cool white, daylight, and warm white. And so my question to you is there a point at which this research goes beyond the point of actual deployability due to complexity?
That's a great question, and that's a very valid question as well. I mean, one of the things that I guess could say a limitation of these metrics that we use in color science and propose for people to use is we want accuracy, and accuracy is important in scientific perspectives. But if people are not going to get the difference, and those minute differences are not going to make a huge impact, then you might just question, okay, what is it? What should we do next, right? And IES TM-30 is kind of improving on color rendering index, which gave people a single value. And what you were saying is 750, 850 was starting with the CCT in one single value. It's not even one single value, one digit, right? Because it was like 8,000 and just reduced it to 8. And then 50 was like 70, 80 was the CRI value. So one of the things in the past that worked well is the correlation between a single value like CCT and a specific light source. If you read papers on 70s, 80s, and that's true for practice as well, people have certain types of fluorescence, and incandescent didn't change, right? The quality of the incandescent was pretty consistent. They didn't have LEDs that can provide a lot of different CCTs. And with that, people kind of had this reference, almost like a benchmark against a certain CCT. They know that if you get a color rate fluorescent, they will have a certain CCT, and they kind of matched. Well, with the LED, that was a problem, and that's why the whole IES TM-30 and the color rendering metrics improving just came up, because there was a need for correcting those color rendering values and CCT. CCT is not a perfect metric as well. So for example, you will have a CCT of 4,000 Kelvin light source that could look a little yellowish white or a purplish light. There's two different light sources. They will look quite different, but they will have the same 4,000 Kelvin. So from your customer perspective, yes, they would like to, and that's not just customers. That's a lot of us, like all the people. There are a lot of information in outside world, right? Outside of our specific interest. And we don't want to make a lot of complex decisions. We want to simplify things as much as possible. So making decisions is easy for us, and we don't have the time to think about every small decision in our lives. So one lamp, like one value, kind of worked pretty fine.
Sure.
But from there, if you get warm white, right, or cool white, and if the value is not matching what they want them to match, it's going to be a problem. I mean, we can still give them warm white, in my cool white, just use nominal names. But if I can create a lamp that will hold like a old warm light, but it's going to look cool white, they're just going to be cheated. They're going to feel cheated because your metric is not doing what it's supposed to do anymore. And that has been the problem. Of course, there's no single solution to that. And I will, so that's one of the things that I want to talk about, because color rendering metrics are not, of course, it's not special to color rendering metrics, but any model, any mathematical model is not perfect, right? There's a saying George Box says, all models are false, but some are useful. So we had to understand that models cannot be perfect.
Some are dangerous.
Some are dangerous. Yeah, that could be dangerous too. They could lead people to make wrong decisions. And that's what we, as lighting color researchers, trying to avoid. We just want to make people, give people the right tools to make decisions. And of course, if people don't want to use those tools, we just have to come to a not conclusion, but I guess in the middle point, it's like, what is the minimum amount of information that will help you to make the best decision? Is it a single value? Is it two values? Is it a nominal scaling like CCT? And I will admit that color is a very visually engaging topic, and everybody has an experience of.
Sure.
So for people, it's kind of an easy topic to talk, but when you start doing the math, it's hard to communicate, and that's why we have all these increasingly getting more complex, or seemingly complex, I should say, metrics. I know it's a long answer to your short question.
Well, my original question was, can you manipulate human behavior doing this? And I think or can you influence human behavior? Whatever word you want to use that's not going to give a negative connotation. But if you want to sell more Coca-Cola, can you use lighting to sell more Coca-Cola or whatever, right? I think that there's a tyranny in choice. I think there's a tyranny in complexity that when it comes out of academia and starts to distill down, if it doesn't go anywhere, it's usually because there was I went to a horticultural conference this time last year, and there was like this industry and academia and contractors all agreed on some simple principles about the deployment of LED lights in the horticultural industry. It was interesting because it wasn't complicated. It was simple. I can't remember it now, but they had agreed, and so there was this agreement, and then there was deployment into the industry through a simplistic deployment. This is what you have to do. And so a contractor who's installing, horticultural lighting systems can have a certain amount of knowledge, but it can't go too far. Otherwise it becomes too complicated, right? Can we get to a point, or can we work towards, from academia to the distributors, which are the, we're in the trenches, you guys are, back in the ivory tower. Is there a way we could work toward metrics or something that was simple enough for distributors to understand, people on an order desk or counter sales talking to customers, that would then make sense to the people buying the light bulbs? Like in order to have a massive effect, something has to be communicated between the people who sell light bulbs to end users and the end users. And in the past, that was marketing. They'd sauce it up, right? They'd call it, full spectrum or daylight, right? To pass this understanding on to a client, they would give it a simple name. Is it possible for your results from your studies? Can you see some distillation of those down to very simple principles that can be passed from an order desk or on the internet to a end user?
Right. Not specifically from my research, but I can see that some people are interested in this. And I think that there's a research gap in this area, definitely. One of the things that what you mentioned is quite important, that there's a complexity of these terms and metrics and numbers and what they mean to people. But I think the first step in trying to diffuse all these complexities into what is useful to the end users is defining what is important, right? Visual perception changes with lighting, we know that, and certain colors can be increased, and the increase in saturation kind of changes people's preference and the perception of the scene. So you can actually manipulate the lighting in a way that certain products will be perceived more likable than others. So you can make people buy objects, or just make them look nicer in a store. And if they like how they look in the mirror, they will just purchase that thing, right? If it's a makeup or it's a piece of clothing, whatever that is. So there is some manipulation and that was a discussion back. It's been discussed a long while. I don't know if people still do that, but a butcher could change the lighting of the meat so that will look more appetizing.
And that works.
So that
works.
Yeah, it works because the visual system cannot really. Well, the visual system is very complex and it does a good job, but there are some limitations. It can be tricked into things that are not real. So it is more works in a way that it kind of tries to get a representation of the system. So you can actually trick the visual system, but specifically illuminating the meat and the reds. And so they wouldn't, if the visual system doesn't get a clue that the lighting is changing, it will think that the object is red. But if you change the overall lighting to red, it will give a clue, and the visual system will know, okay, everything is red, so I'll just recalibrate myself, and the red of the meat is not actually as red. But the way you do the design is very important, right? So the intent is very important in that. And can you control that? Yeah.
No, you finish up. Can you control that? Go ahead.
No, I just want to say, can you control that? I don't know if
I think you
have
can.
a lot of
I think you
control.
can. I think I think when we look at, so Greg and I have been in tens of thousands of different facilities, from mines to third-party logistics to manufacturing, and looked at their lighting systems. And, a lot of times you're just in there, you're looking up, okay, you want to save some energy or whatever. But what's interesting is that there are certain applications where we have known effects. So, for example, let's say you go to a theater to watch a live performance. What's going to happen is the theater is going to be very bright when you walk in, when you want to find your seat. Okay. And then prior to the show starting, what they're going to do is they're going to create a massive contrast in light between where the audience sits and the stage. And the reason for this is to let people know it's not time to get up. It's cueing, right? It's not time to get up. It's not time to be distracted by the person over there picking their nose or whatever's going on, or that person whispering. It's time for you to be quiet and look up here. Right. And so that's something that's fascinating to me, that, we've known this for 100 years, that you can, by making a massive contrast, you can create focus and guide people's behavior towards something. Same thing happens in a sports stadium and an ice hockey rink, where they'll dim the lights on the fans, and they'll put all the light on the thing. And so you're focused in there, and that's where your eyes are going. And that's where you're told by the lighting system to do something. And, another example is casinos. So when people talk about circadian lighting, the casinos have known from the 1960s that if you screw up someone's circadian rhythm, if you shine 5,000 K light in their eyes, directly into their eyes, they'll give you their paycheck, right? They've known this for forever, right? How do we then take those principles and then re-look at them and re-examine them for ways in which we can deploy lighting in other aspects of our world to make the kinds of results that are healthy for everybody? Yes. So it's time to sit still and watch the performance, or it's time for you to leave now when it's time to leave, the lights come up, right? And now it's time for you to go home. You can't stay here, right? How do we know that when you dim the lights, people become more relaxed? Nobody wants to meditate in a bright room. Meditation, darkness is required. How can we take those basic, crude, rough things that we know and how do we study that and distill it so that we can create principles that help people make better lighting systems, more efficient lighting systems?
I think there's a lot of great examples that you mentioned, and definitely true that there's a lot of basic principles out there, and it's been discussed widely. And if you just open any lighting book right now, that you will find those principles, right? And that's one of the first things that you should be taught in lighting design practice. The complexity, I think, comes when the lighting conditions are not always in the extremes. When you have a contrast of 1 to 20, 1 to 50, yes, that will direct people. But what happens if you have the contrast 1 to 5? Is there a quantified value? Is the background affecting? And it's again, that becomes how you model visual system. And for me, that's almost like that's the holy grail of vision research, and that's huge. It's not just lighting. It's for humans to understand the brain, how it works, and how we can process information. It's the ultimate goal for us to understand this. If we could understand it, that would be no questions. We wouldn't be talking this, right? We will just know how it works. We'll just put the lighting where it's needed, when it's needed, and people would do that. So the complexity comes with different things, and people's lives and contrast, color, surfaces, age, people's visual perception changes, and all this kind of stuff. So we can do rules of thumb, and in a very busy airport, you want to find your way, right? Spot will just guide you to the to the place that you should go, but darkness will just say, okay, you're not supposed to go there. It's maintenance or security or whatever, that kind of stuff. And I think that's an important way of teaching lighting, and that's kind of one of the things that we try to do in Penn State, that teach these basics, but then again, understand that life is not as black and white always. You should sometimes make assumptions about how people's going to use the specific space. And I believe, and that's my personal, view, and that is why lighting is so kind of hard to quantify. lighting design, the process.
Mhm.
You cannot really say, okay, you just put 1 to 3 contrast. People's gonna be there all the time. You're gonna get super good lighting, and that's the only thing that you should do. There's always context, and there's different tasks, and there's a different users. So you have to first understand the space, understand the users, understand the context or the textures, the colors and the surfaces and the brightness and all that kind of stuff becomes a little more complicated. And how do you put that in a formula, or just how do you put that in a table? Can you
I think
make a
the
lookup
formula
table?
I think the formula is the issue. I think
Mhm.
I think the problem is that what so if you look at the what the circadian people, or whatever you want to call them, the people that are studying the health effects of lighting. So what they've realized is that darkness is important, and darkness is light in a way. It's a type of light,
Mhm.
right, that we need. But what's curious to me is that a lot of stuff's coming out about light changing. So being one color in the morning and a different color in the afternoon, and sort of gradually, and then level clouds going across the sun, and then different light levels. I'd like to see an experiment where, like that 1-to-5 ratio. Let's say you're walking down the aisle of a grocery store, and the light levels change on the products as you're
Mhm.
walking down the aisle. And so the ketchup all of a sudden is dark, and then it's light. I mean, I think the problem is like trying to, this is the formula, this is what you do.
Mhm.
I think it might be interesting to see how humans react to significant, but not drastic, but significant contrast of light on products as people experience them on the shelves, or or for example, in an art gallery. Museums are very interesting for this, where
Mhm.
you're walking through the museum, and the light shining on the piece is one color, then it's less bright, then it's broader, then it changes its color temperature, and you're seeing this piece of art change in real time in front of you. So this idea that this is the set amount, it's cool white, you want this many lumens, and you want to shine it like this, and this is the CCT, and that, I think that's part of the problem. I think people's attention is called to by changes in light. And if we were to
Yep.
look at, instead of fixing values, if we were to say, no, you don't want to fix anything. What you want is it to evolve in real time in front of the person, like within 30 seconds, say, or within a certain amount of time. You're like, all of a sudden the mustard becomes very bright, and you're like, oh, maybe I need mustard, right? I bet you for sure that would work. I just have a
Yeah,
gut feeling on it.
definitely.
Yeah, you agree?
No, your gut feeling is, I definitely agree with your gut feeling, and that's kind of what the visual research tells us. The vision works in a way that we are attracted to the changes in the environment, time, temporal, and spatial changes, because things that are stable and steady is boring for us. We are in a way that we're trying to find out what's happening around us, because that it is more relevant for us. Is it an enemy? Is it food? Is it something that is changing in the visual environment? Tells us that there's something important for us to focus. And if you did that in the example, change the lighting or the contrast in the aisle, and people will just definitely will go to that. Their attention will be drawn to that specific product. But of course, we're not just visual robots. We're not just looking at things that we are thrown, because we have a cognitive process as well. So again, brain is very complex, right? If you don't eat mustard or just hate mustard, right? If you're a person who just been overdosed with mustard when you're a kid, you wouldn't buy it no matter how much light you put in it. So it will probably give you a negative connotations. Oh my God, I don't want to see this right now. I'm just going to move on. So
yeah, I want to see that other thing they're highlighting. Like
yeah.
what like even a negative, even if you could create a negative reaction, that is so wonderful. Like even though like forget about whether I don't care if they sell more Alpo dog food next week. Like that's not what I'm interested in. What I'm wondering is, can you change people's reactions to a store or to a museum or whatever interior environment you want by not by changing the color temperature or TM-30, but simply by creating real-time contrasts that are at a certain rate of change. So it's not too fast that it shocks you, but it's fast enough that you're able to experience it, have a different visual experience as you're walking through a museum. I think that's the holy grail, man. I think if people could figure out what it would do, if you could create disgust, mustard, that's wonderful. Like if someone told me they could do that, that's fascinating. You know, like shine some, make Trump look more orange. Like if you hate him, make him look even more orange. You know what I mean? Like that's what, and not to get political, folks, this is a non-political show,
Sure.
But make Biden look more pale, by, hitting him with that 7,500, you know what I'm saying? Like if we could learn to do that, man, that would be so amazing.
I mean, you can very simply do that, and it's a trick maybe people shouldn't use and shouldn't know. But if you make people, again, it's a rule of thumb. It's not that I am, saying that people should use that, but that is kind of a knowledge that I guess anyone, a little color experience will agree with that. When people have a green tint, they kind of look sick.
Yeah.
Right. So if you change the color rendering in a way that people, and for us, it turns out in literature strongly suggests that people are making decisions on the color appearance of red objects. And that seems to be, and there is some small evidence on the evolutionary importance of red because of first blood, the skin, complexion, because we kind of look into other people just to see if they're sick, and historically has been, right? Or just recognize their faces, are they foes or friends? So red is an important color for us. So we make judgments based on how color of red changes. So if it gets too saturated, which is like, that's
is pink red?
Changing. Pink is quite desaturated red, I would say, and a little of purple as well. Hue.
So I would say that's why women wear red lipstick.
Red has huge connotations in a lot of different things, like architecture, design, and one of the things is just it's fire. It's blood. It's color of passion and love. So red in that aspect is very strong, and I'm not really surprised that red lipstick is much preferred by women. So again, that kind of goes into cognitive aspects, and because in different cultures there seems to be certain trends in terms of colors. Like red is quite important for a lot of cultures, but if say yellow, in certain cultures in China or in India, they will mean different things to what it means in a Western country. So you cannot always generalize those meanings, but there seems to be some trend in certain colors like red and white and black and a few things. Yeah.
So in terms of the importance of seeing color, we have CRI, or we've had CRI. Now it's this TM-30-15 or TM-30, whatever. Is that the right model in your opinion? Is that the way the lighting industry should go, and when will it get there, if that is the right way?
That's a great question. I mean, CRI has, given that I'm teaching color science, I'm doing color science, and I work with folks who did IES TM-30, and my supervisor was working on CQS, who is a model color rendering model metric that was predecessor of IES TM-30, and kind of proposed this idea that one value is not enough to quantify the color appearance of objects. And that comes important because it turns out people are not just looking at light sources, especially the laymen, like normal folk, right? They're not just going under the ceiling, this is the color of the light source, it's interesting, right? What is more interesting for people is the objects. Because light, as you mentioned, actually is an interesting point that I wanted to mention. The slow gradual changes over time in lighting is not always more obvious, more evident to people. For us, the lightness changes, and lightness is different than brightness in the sense that lightness belongs to objects.
You're saying lightness. You're saying lightness?
Lightness.
Okay.
Yeah, lightness. So when I say lightness is the brightness of a surface. So the colors of objects are called light. Right? Brightness is usually used for light sources. A light source could be bright or dim. A surface could be very light or very dark. Right? So those are two different aspects. But lightness, it turns out, this is more important, and there's a lot of vision researchers saying this. Even though the ratios are not huge, people are using the lightness values. It's almost like an internal mathematical calculation we're doing really fast, and we are very good at this, to find out the edges of the objects, how we can detect objects, and what is the difference, that kind of stuff. If you change the lighting overall slowly, it kind of does contribute to our cognitive purposes. We know that, oh yeah, it's getting dark now, so the day is ending, or the light is super bright, it must be noon, that kind of stuff, right? But overall, for us, it's more about the objects that is important. So color rendering metrics kind of trying to get you to the idea that if you change the lighting, the objects will change, and it might be important, especially for the design purposes. So what CRI sucked at was, how do you calculate this? The color models are outdated. There was only 8 samples or desaturated, so it wasn't really representative of what we see in real life. And also, some experiments, the experiments that kind of showed CRI wasn't really estimating what people's perception, and that was a bigger problem, right? So we were saying that, okay, CRI 90, you'd think the higher number is going to be good, right? It turns out it's not. If you have a higher score, you might still be bad, or you might have a lower CRI value, and people prefer that. So CRI is not giving a score of what you think you're judging, and that was for me, that was the major problem.
What's the CRI of candlelight or firelight?
That would be close to 100.
So okay, so. So like that, I would say that at night people would prefer that light. Like if you were asking them, would you sit on this porch with 5,000 kCFLs, or would you rather sit by this fire here? Their preference is going to be that. So so what are you saying though? That the CRI is a crude metric that can't tell us anything?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the way it calculates how you like things is not perfect. Okay. And the things that are good about CRI is kept in IES TM-30. So if anything, that would be okay. And I agree with that. And there's a lot of people who agree with that at the time as well. And they were saying, okay, the fluorescence came on in the 50s and so on. And they're saying, okay, incandescent we know it's kind of fire, it just burn a piece of coal and it kind of works. And one of the reasons that we like is again, evolutionary reasons. We evolved under either daylight or fire. So people have a preference for that kind of color, even though it's not perfect in terms of color rendering. You cannot really differentiate blue objects under incandescent. So it doesn't do a good job in terms of discrimination, but it has this emotional sense that it kind of feels cozy and fireplace, a kind of connotation with things that we like. And people kind of kept that, okay, CRI should be, again, we should have a reference point. What we like should be the reference. And if you get close to it, you are a good lamp. And that was the idea with CRI, right? If you're either daylight or incandescent, firelight, candlelight, whatever you want to call this.
Sure.
And they were saying, okay, 100 is good. Lower scores is bad. But what happened that LEDs could increase the saturation of reds. And because it's different than the spectrum was different than candlelight incandescent, like a neodymium incandescent lamp, kind of CRI of 70, 78 or something, people prefer that more than incandescent. They were kind of similar lamp, but CRI incandescent, neodymium incandescent was lower CRI. People prefer that because it increased the saturation of red, hence the importance of red, right? So that was the limitation of this. Like we know that we like incandescent in certain aspects, but it's not the ideal source, right? And then IES TM-30 kind of built on that and added, okay, it's not just the fidelity, what we call fidelity is being close to the reference. And then it's the preference as well, because CRI doesn't really tell you about what people will like under this lighting condition. And at the time, people didn't really care, I guess, to say, okay, we know that being close to CRI is good. And they assume, and that's an important assumption in CRI, that if it's close to incandescent, people will like it. They should be fine. And it turns out it's not, because now we have LEDs. So the major philosophical question that color rendering research and color rendering and people are interested in this facing is this. What is important for us? What are we trying to quantify? Is it colorfulness? Is it preference? Is it being close to some fidelity or like normalness? And I see, I have done this interesting meta-analysis of color rendering research studies starting from early 30s or 40s up to 2019, where I was doing my postdoc. And it turns out these studies use a lot of different subjective evaluations. They just say normalness, acceptability, preference, attractiveness, saturation, colorfulness. Some of the words are kind of similar in terms of meaning, but they're not well defined. So in these experiments, we don't know what people are judging, right? And if your metrics are based on these vague definitions, you're having a problem because what you're proposing is a little vague. And that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we should first identify what is important. Maybe we should start clarifying what these cluster of words and what is more important for us. And if they're similar, just group them into one and just say, okay, this is important for people. People will if you want to buy a lamp, you're going out like end user, right? He doesn't care about, he or she or they don't care about really what's happening with the energy efficiency, how efficient they are. They just maybe want to see how object looks, right? Maybe specifically red objects. Is that going to be enough information for you? Just giving
the lighting industry is obsessed with trying to pass on information that people don't care about. I'm serious, right? And so,
and we want it easy too, just like an easy number, 90.
Yeah, 90, right? we call, but the lighting industry handled this on its own for years with marketing. Okay, right. So the marketing departments would take these lamps and give them cool white, daylight, right, full spectrum, healthy bulbs, healthy full spectrum, right, and they'd sauce it all up, right? And the way they were thinking about it is, how can I get someone to buy something, right? The way the lighting industry is thinking about it now is, how can I pass on this super complicated information to people so they can make better choices on energy and color? Right? And we're kind of stuck there because you look at the lighting facts program. I think it's been abandoned, right? You look at these different things where, color temperature, they put the bar on the box and it's red at one end and blue at the other. And there's like a little arrow pointing. People don't understand this. They don't get it. And do we need to bring in some black magic marketeers into with these, you academic side, the scientists, and say, guys, so we have to come up with something focused on what people care about, and that is very simple, so we can pass it on. Whereas I think in the lighting industry, it gets stuck in this TM-30 cycle of saturation and this and that, and it's too difficult for people. How do we get beyond this?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think there are different ways of tackling this, and I think one of first of all, I guess we have to acknowledge there's a philosophical conflict between these two different approaches, what I will call top-down to bottom-up, right? Top-down is coming from lighting industry or just researchers saying that this is good, you should use this, and bottom-up is like, this is what I need, give me what I need. And maybe that might be super simple as well. So I would be, obviously being a researcher, I will be being one side, but I'll try to understand from the other perspective too. And what I will say is, in a society where things are made, decisions are made by the available information, you would like to have as much information as possible. If you don't have, and I agree that forcing that information is not good. You shouldn't really, but you should provide that information. If people don't choose to use that information, that's up to them. But all capitalistic systems are based on the assumption, at least classical systems, are based on the assumption that people are making decisions in a knowledgeable way. They know everything. They know all products. They know every aspect of whatever decision they have to make, and they make logical decisions.
Rational, I think is the word they use. Rational. But the consumer is not rational. We know they're not rational. That's changed.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right?
They're not. They're totally irrational. And the funny thing is, so I would say that of my online orders, when anybody's ordering a fluorescent tube online, I would say 40% of the time they have no idea what they're going to get. They've just been exhausted in the search, and that code looks close enough. F30T12CW. It must be 30 inches, Greg. It must be 30 inches because it's no, that's the wattage, bud. 30 is the wattage. It's 36 inches long. Oh man, I got to return these from Vancouver, BC back to Toronto. I thought it was 30 inches, not 36 inches, right? So there has to be, or maybe there doesn't, because Greg and I have often talked about how the lighting industry likes complex metrics because it confuses people and drives up prices.
Okay.
Right? So,
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. So let's make it as confusing as possible so that two products that are identical can seem like they're actually very different when they're really identical. This happens all the time in lighting. Like I would say,
right.
I don't know if it's, we haven't decided, but my suspicion is that someone at the top knows this. And they're like, change the name, change the metric, change the color name, and then everyone will have to buy our brand after because they'll never be able to get it figured out. And that's true, man. That's true. That happens. You know, people want, I need to have this SSPX 4100K. Well, that's just a 41K T8, brother. Like there's 100 replacements for that lamp. No. It has to be the same as the one that was there before. So it's got to be SPX 41 Eco. And you know, so there's complexity is good for the lighting industry because it raises prices. Complexity is bad for the consumer because it removes choice in a sense, or makes the choices more complex than they're willing to invest.
Right. I kind of understand what you're saying in the sense that people don't want to make complex choices because, you know, they have other things to worry about. And I guess the question is, or just the important note is, what is that the sameness? Can we agree on, does everybody agree on these two lamps that have different metrics? Are they really the same, or what is your acceptability rate of that being the same? I mean, you probably wouldn't mind, or just X person wouldn't mind, but there might be a person who's very sensitive to, let's say, flicker or whatever that thing that you are not giving information on. And, you know, that flicker, I mean, specific aspects of lighting could be health-related, could cause health-related issues. So, again, it's a whole issue of how much information is needed, but also how much information is enough. And I'm not really, I don't know if there's only one person who pushes down information to say, okay, let's make them complex and just let them buy. But there might be companies, you know, or sales, I guess, you know, that kind of could use that to their advantage. And that's no way of knowing that, at least from my perspective.
Oh, they do it for sure. I'll tell you for sure that they do that. Oh, yeah. That's what it's about, bro. You got to sell the sizzle and the sauce. Come on, man. For sure they know about it, and for sure they're doing it. That's certain. I can tell you that, guaranteed. The question is whether or not, there's a couple questions here, but we're almost at the end of the hour here. So I'll leave you with one more, Alp. Is it ethical? Is it ethical that the lighting industry has so much confusion in it when it's not necessary?
I think that the issue is that people don't see this complexity as complexity. I think that, at least from my perspective, I see this as information that people trying to help people make decisions. I don't see myself as someone who's just trying to do some evil work in a lab like a mad scientist. It's like, okay, I'll just have to push people more complex metrics so they can, someone else can make money out of, because why would I do that?
I wouldn't say you do that. I wouldn't say you do that, but I think what we're calling complexity, I think lighting manufacturer, I'm going to get in trouble for this one. No one's going to sponsor our show again, Greg. I think what we're calling complexity is what people would call brand differentiation. Would be another name for this.
Okay. That's an interesting. I definitely agree that some of the nominal categorization of products is a little out of hand. That people use these buzzwords for marketing purposes, like circadian lighting or human-centric lighting.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean? Like, what are you trying to say? Like, healthy lighting. Like, do we know that there's enough evidence? From a scientist perspective, I just want to see evidence if it's working. And I know as a scientist, it's like, I don't think there's 100%, there's no case, mostly, even in physics, and our rules are pretty governed, right? You can't really say it's 100%. there's always exceptions, there's always caveats, and we want to make sure that things work most of the time. And as I mentioned, the models are not perfect, but they're useful, and we have to talk about the usefulness of those models. And then brings back to the full circle, like, okay, let's decide what is useful and how can we make it so that people understand and make these decisions. Maybe not everybody has to understand this. Like a person who wants to change the bulb, there must be an easier way of finding this information without reading, like, pages of catalogs and all that kind of information. But a designer who is trying to make a space look nicer for a specific museum or, retail store has to understand what lighting does, because that's what you're doing. You're making a decision will affects people's perception and behavior, and then probably change the sales or whatever. So you have to make decisions, informed decisions, based on evidence-based results, and that's what I think is useful. That kind of information, how it is used in outside real world. I mean, probably this real world as well, but it's like outside world. It is all outside of our control, of course. Once you do a metric, and I never proposed a metric, by the way. I shouldn't say like, I am doing that kind of work, and people have done this work, and there's, it's research. Once you propose a metric, and put it out there, and then you see how people react to that, and when you get some feedback, and you just keep changing this and modifying, and that's important as well. And folks in the IES TM-30 have kind of worked really hard towards that, and they're still trying to educate people to see how people can use that, and that's all, of course, different question.
So I'm going to thank you for coming on the show, Dr. Alp Durmus. I'm going to say before I go that I was talking about the marketing departments of manufacturers, Greggy, not the hard workers at the IES working on TM-30. Yes. Okay, just so I'm cool, thank you. and the rest of the researchers and that out there that we love so much. And if you've made it to the end of the show with Dr. Durmus, thank you very much. Doctor, thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for inviting me. That was a great talk. Thank you.
I enjoyed it as well.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Have a nice day.
Oh, crazy time. Oh, yeah. It's crazy time. We're going to tcpi.com. We're going to get crazy, Greg.
They're getting crazy with their Solistic line. Again, I said it before, but I don't know if crazy is the right word on that one, but we'll say it is. But it's really smart, actually, because what goes in the LED light bulb itself matters. Not all LED chips are the same. And TCP makes their own LED chips. They're an actual manufacturer lighting, which we've highlighted before. And in their Solistic line, it's a LED chip that eliminates the blue spike you find in a lot of LEDs. So what does that tell you? That it mimics, or it does as close a job as it can to mimicking the sunlight. Sunlight is important. Color is important. TCP's got you covered with a great product line there.
And when you're going out there to sell lights, man, you gotta buy into the sizzle a little bit here. We got a lot of good innovations coming down the pipe in the lighting industry here. People want them in the field. And so what we talk about on the show, we're trying to push the knowledge. Greg and I, we're kind of spearheading this trench warfare thing on the front end. But at the end of the day, we take these microphone headsets off and we go swing through the trees with a knife in our teeth. And we want to sell people this stuff. And so do it. Go to tcpi.com. Check them out. I go there every day. I order from them I don't know what every day, but almost every day. And so tcpi.com, Greg. Of course, Nailed, long-time members of Nailed, and they're crazy members. And, we can't talk enough about it, man. If you're not associated now, I don't even know if we're going to let you in anymore. We might not even be taking members anymore, Greg. I'm so sick of it.
We're still taking you on if you're the right one.
Yeah, come on down. Hang out. And, of course, Dr. Durmus, we really appreciate you coming on the show. These scientists, guys, it's always funny when they bump into us because it's a totally different conversation than they're used to in academia. Mm-hmm. They don't get it. They don't get the hey, how do we sell it? Well, what are you talking about? We're researching this. We're trying. No. We want to know because we want to
sell it.
We want to sell light bulbs, brother. What can we tell the peeps out there that they need to know? And so right now, the lighting industry and the science has not really merged yet the way it has in horticultural lighting. I look forward to that. I think it's going to happen in the next 5 years or so. We're really going to start to see massive innovations and stuff trickling down to the street, Craig.
That's right. Let's get ready for it now. That's what we're doing. Prepping.
I'm not prepping. I'm selling now. I'm ready to go. For all you out there listening, get going. It's time to go out and sell light bulbs. Bye for now.
Written on the rectory wall, there's a sign there for all. You are lost, Lord is there to find you.